Armored Core 6: Fires of Rubicon is a unique game in this day and age, a game that dares to make a genre that has not had any prominent releases in years relevant once more. What FromSoftware has done with the latest iteration of Armored Core is quite remarkable. Armored Core 6 nails the sense of scale and fluidity of combat with your mech, becoming the best-selling Armored Core entry in the franchise, as well as outselling the entire franchise combined. How did Armored Core get here? The mecha genre in video games has been through quite a lot over the past 40 years, starting in the arcades, later becoming a part of the home console space, leading to games such as Mobile Suit Gundam Hot Scramble, releasing in 1985 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. As technology would advance, video games would grow more impressive, so naturally the mecha games would too. A little bit later on, but early success in the mecha genre would be the arcade game Virtual on Cyber Troopers. This game would have you duel other mecha pilots side by side to have an immersive experience. Its last entry, Virtual on Mars, was released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2. Metal Gear Solid would popularize mechs with the Metal Gear Rex battle. Metal Gear would play an important role in getting the idea of mecha out there. The mechs in MGS are cold, impersonal machines that don't resemble anything close to humanity. This is especially interesting due to what would be the distinct difference between mechs and video games. Typically, in the East, you would have mechs that were more humanoid-like, with it being seen as an extension of the user rather than a weapon or a tool to be used. Conversely, the West sees mechs as nothing more than a weapon to use to get the job done. This is an insight into how different cultures view war in different lights from others. Although Metal Gear Solid was made by a Japanese company, Konami, Hideo Kojima is a massive Westaboo, so that checks out. Kojima would make other games with mechs, but one named Zone of the Enders, releasing in 2001, would have you play as the mechs called Orbital Frames that would focus on space combat. There were several attempts to create a mecha franchise, but it wouldn't become more invested into until the 2010s with the games such as Hawken, a free-to-play first-person shooter. Although the servers for this game would eventually shut down in 2018, a unique spin-off of the mecha genre would end with Titanfall, releasing in 2014, was a huge success and led to a sequel of Titanfall 2 in 2016. The gist of it is that you can jump in and out of your mechs to attack weak points and gain positional advantage. The game was very chaotic and, as you would imagine with how dynamic the gameplay would end up being. Unfortunately, the sequel was sandwiched between two bigger releases of two shooters that overshadowed it. Afterwards, the genre would enter decline, not being able to recover from the bad releases, or just getting overshadowed by other genres of games, such as the rise of hero shooters and other live service games. This would all reach a breaking point with one of the worst games of 2019 that combined the two genres of live service and mecha into a joke called Anthem. Without spending too much time on that, I want to bring up another mecha game that wasn't bad by any means, but it wasn't nearly as good as it could have been. This game would be Daemon X Machina, which, interestingly enough, this game was produced by Kenichiro Sukada, who previously worked on the Armored Core series. This game would receive mixed reviews, but sell well enough to ensure a sequel. Daemon X Machina made it a point to be more vibrant in the color choice to make it more appealing and visually striking, something the Armored Core series didn't really focus on. This game sounds like it had a chance to be a great success, but the game was hindered by the parent company Marvelous, who would copyright claim footage of the game, preventing any incentive to do coverage of the game from people on YouTube who do help sell your game to a new audience. This is a new IP as well. There was no pre-established audience who would buy your game day one. Add this on top of a declining genre, it's hurting your success. The mecha genre would really suffer from the poor releases and lack of innovation, or best of all, self-sabotage. There was an abundance of these games, but a lot of them brought the same ideas and tropes. It would grow stale and it would fall into obscurity for half a decade. Something also to consider is that people's taste may change. Shifting to other genres, there needed to be a fresh take on mecha, and it also needed to be a really good game on top of that. There was no game at that time that would be able to achieve such a feat. Next up, after covering the decline of the mecha genre, I want to cover the history of Armored Core. Leading up to the last entry in 2013, and picking up later with the announcement of Armored Core 6. The Armored Core franchise would make its debut in 1997 with Armored Core 1 for the PlayStation. It was a success and led to an expansion that was a non-numbered sequel that came out later on the same year. Armored Core 1 would take place on a somewhat distant future of Earth, After disaster would strike, it would leave the surface uninhabitable. This would cause people to be forced underground. The very first Armored Core is where the series staple would emerge of corporations fighting for power, with there being 2 corps that you can do missions for. There would be a power struggle between the 2 that would lead to missions unique to whomever you side with. The mercenaries underground would not have any loyalty to one side or another, but to whoever could pay the most. Armored Core was a game in which your movement would be slow. This is something that wouldn't speed up until the 4th release. Verticality is an important part of the gameplay loop in Armored Core, with you having to fly up to get to new areas. This created a problem that wasn't properly addressed until Armored Core 6, with certain builds not being able to scale walls, essentially preventing certain builds from being able to complete some missions. The impact on the genre of mecha from the Armored Core was just starting. Very often Armored Core would score not too well, with it not being nearly as praised as FromSoftware's recent games. Only a select few games would score above the 60s. Although it was a niche game, it would still sell well enough to become FromSoft's staple at that time. The Armored Core series would change and adapt over the years. The games don't follow a timeline of events throughout the games. Almost every new game is a new universe that has been rebooted to tell a new story. Besides Armored Core 2, which was an indirect sequel to 1, this trend would end with Armored Core 3. Although there would still be spin-off sequels that would continue the story of a numbered entry such as Armored Core Last Raven, continuing the story of Armored Core 3. Armored Core Project Phantasma is the second Armored Core release that would change the formula with a shift to linearity and adding a new features to the Armored Core series, being the arena mode and the replay mode. Project Phantasma would allow you to carry over your save, which meant if you could have items exclusive from the first game, as Project Phantasma is a direct sequel. The arena mode would be featured in more Armored Core games, even returning in the latest Fires of Rubicon. The arena mode was a section of the game where you could duel NPC mechs that were a part of the game's world. The replay mode is exactly what it sounds like, allowing you to replay missions. Project Phantasma introduced the arena mode, leading to Master Arena and another expansion. This would be expanded upon further with Armored Core 3, which allowed you to bring along those that you fought on missions that came from the arena. Armored Core would be difficult for newcomers to get into as the mech building was complex and tutorials were not readily available. The controls of these games were a little odd as well, with the better way, or rather the superior way of playing, being to hold the controller like this. If you know anything about Armored Core, you probably have seen this before. For those who are blissfully unaware, it's best not to think about it too much. Believe it or not, this works pretty well too. Someone who has never played an Armored Core seeing this would probably be scared and run away. These factors may stop new players from joining the mech building madness, leaving the growth stagnant. This would change later on with more entries. There would be alterations to how you build your mechs. As more Armored Cores were made, the series would go through some troubling times, with the 4th entry selling the least amount of any Armored Core. Something worth mentioning is that this game was Hidetaka Miyazaki's directing debut title. After finishing up work on Armored Core Last Raven, he'd be promoted to director. Armored Core 4 is a very notable release in the Armored Core franchise, as it was the first game to release on more than just a PlayStation. To say it was a very bold game would be an understatement. It would do something radical to the game's speed. The movement would be increased drastically, making the game feel a lot faster, even somewhat visceral with the addition of the boost mechanics that would let you quickly dodge away. The mech customization would see an overhaul, making it more streamlined and concise, but not in a way that takes away the depth from the mech building experience. Armored Core 4 would welcome the long-requested addition of online multiplayer. This was met with criticism of the map selection and the game modes to play around with. All the adjustments and refinements sound good on paper, but this is met with the usual mixed reception, being praised by some but ridiculed by others. Here's a clip of everyone's favorite, Jeff Keighley, sharing his thoughts on Armored Core 4.
Multiplayer, I think, is very basic. I mean,
it is
a couple, it's a couple maps. You can just sort of, throw people in there. It's kind of like deathmatch with maps.
Totally. And it's not even as fun as Virtual On was back in the day.
Well, where's like the co-op and kind of the common mission, the different type of mission types, defending, bases and stuff. I mean, this thing it really sucks.
Tonight, we are thrilled to share with you another global game announcement. This comes from one of the most decorated developers in the world, who consistently pushes this medium forward for each of its releases. This studio has been nominated multiple times for Game of the Year here at this very show, and I am beyond grateful that they have chosen the Game Awards as the place for this global announcement.
I'm kind of bored with mech games in general. Because next gen, you can do better storytelling, you can have characters, and now it's just these these big hulking pieces of metal that can blow up buildings. It doesn't work for me.
I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10.
You got to be below 5 on something like this. I was really disappointed. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10.
A 4 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
This is all the more hilarious when you think about the last Game Awards, seeing how much he would hype up Fires of Rubicon. A lot can change in 14 years, one of them being your opinion on FromSoftware's Mecha games. Armored Core has changed a lot since then. Maybe, through this change, it has become more appealing to the audience that once strongly disliked it. As I've said many times throughout the video, Armored Core has a history of being polarizing. This was just how it was. It's how Armored Core remained niche for over 16 years and 14 games. Not to say that those games are bad or inferior to more recent games, but through this struggle they would polish and improve, performing what it means to be a mecha game. Perception of the games would shift in this period of hiatus and eventual revival. I don't want to discuss this period just yet, instead pivot to the next mainline entry, Armored Core 5. Armored Core would have the next number release, Armored Core 5, come out January 26th of 2012. After criticisms and low sales of 4, they would take 5 years, 1 month, and 25 days before releasing the next numbered entry. Armored Core 5 had a new director come in and guide this next iteration. With this change in leadership, they would go back severely on the focus of faster mech movement, with even the lightest of ACs being heavy in comparison to the previous games. Deciding to get rid of the extremely fast movement or combat due to the critics saying it wasn't tactical enough, their idea of a solution to this issue was to add jumping on walls or buildings to gain a vertical advantage, letting you engage with your environment more than ever before with the urban locations. There were more additions, such as the weapons that you can mount on your back, and the introduction of overread weapons, which would allow you to go above the limit of your AC for a brief period. This game would also bring forth a scanning mode. This scanning mode was crucial to piloting your mech with efficiency. The scan mode works exactly how it sounds. It shows the information of your surroundings, such as enemy position, if you're close enough, their AP, resistances, and most importantly, it regens your energy faster. Making sure to utilize scan mode at the most opportune time is crucial to mastering the controls of your mech. The step back from fast-paced gameplay would leave fans not too pleased with the new direction. A complaint with 4 was the lack of tactics, so to overcorrect this, they would place heavy emphasis on vertical movement in scan mode. The consequence would leave the community not liking it too much or viewing it as the weakest of the series. I feel like I've seen this before. The game would end up selling a lot more than the previous entry, selling 164,000 copies in the first week. Armored Core 5 receives an expansion called Verdict Day. This released the following year on September 24th. After Verdict Day, the Armored Core series would go MIA for a long period of time. The reasoning for this was due to the success of this subgenre that was taking off a little bit. The first iteration, Demon's Souls, was a success, but the second would prove to be the bigger success with the release of Dark Souls. The more profitable idea would take precedent, to no one's surprise. Armored Core was left behind. There wouldn't be another entry until the announcement of Armored Core 6 at the 2022 Game Awards, which I briefly showcased earlier. I want to get to that, but first I want to talk about the period in between. To say that there was a lot of speculation would not be doing it justice, as it was just radio silence for the most part about the current plans for Armored Core going forward. Was the series dead? Will there ever be another Armored Core? Will there be a reboot like the previous games? Many questions. There would be a shortage of answers though. So Miyazaki would state in an interview with Famitsu back in June of 2018 that there were a few projects under work. He would go on to say, in an earlier interview, I mentioned 3 projects moving forward in our core development schedules, but Delcedine is not one of those projects. I just wanted to let some fans know that. This would fuel the speculation even further. Was Armored Core finally going to return, or was it going to be a surprise Dark Souls 4, or maybe Bloodborne 2? It would turn out to be Sekiro, Elden Ring, and lastly, Armored Core 6. Although this speculation did end up having merit, it really didn't matter, as somehow Miyazaki would end up confirming the existence of the next Armored Core, presumably accidentally, 2 years prior to this, at a roundtable interview in Bandai Namco's headquarters in Tokyo. This statement was immediately retracted by FromSoftware afterwards, which makes you think it was likely very, early on in development, to the point where they couldn't show anything even if they wanted to. To go over what he said in the interview with IGN, he replied, "So there are several titles that we are currently working on. Some of these several titles that we are currently working on, some of those are dark fantasy, some of those can be a mech. That's one thing. The second thing is that one of the new titles I've been working on will probably comply with the expectations from the fans in a straightforward manner. The last thing is another title that will probably be a little bit weird. When we actually announce the titles, probably fans will react with, 'Oh, what the hell is this weird game that Miyazaki has created?' The interviewer would press him about whether or not there would be another Armored Core game. In response, 'Yeah, we're working on an Armored Core.' He would not comment further on the matter. Perhaps this weird game that would make you say, 'What the hell is the idea of mixing fantasy and mecha?' Moving on to the reveal, at last, Armored Core 6 was revealed at the 2022 Game Awards, and millions watched live as Armored Core would finally make its return at last after 10 years since the last numbered entry. Armored Core has a history of using visually striking CGI trailers to showcase their worlds. This one would be no different. This reveal trailer would spark excitement all across the community, with many being intrigued as to what modern Armored Core would look like. A commenter would say, "I really need to see more of this before I get excited. The trailer looks good. Additionally, art direction looks stellar, and the music is so sick. That trailer was perfect. My gosh." Teared up. I was beginning to think that we'd never see the day. As someone who doesn't enjoy the Souls games, but did play some of the OG PS1 Armored Core games, I do want to play this. The CGI trailer can only give you an idea of what it would look like. So until the gameplay was revealed publicly, the community was largely in the dark. Another commenter would say, "It's going to be interesting seeing if the game carries any of the Souls DNA, since this is the first real Armored Core game to launch after Souls, as the series has become a mainstay for From. I know V came out after Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, but you get what I mean." Quite a few people were under the impression that Armored Core would take the formula from the Souls series and implement them into the Armored Core series. although they would later clarify that it wasn't a Souls game. Nobody would know what the game looked or played like until the devs at FromSoftware would show it off at a gameplay reveal. Although they didn't show much, it gave people more of an idea as to what they were going to expect. Armored Core 6 would then release on August 5th of this year, and I don't intend to review the game yet again, but talk about why it's my game of the year and how important it is for the genre. This game is a true love letter to the fans. They put special care into handling this series, blending the old and new, evolving the game in a way that would allow new players to get into the game, but also satisfying longtime fans with the most polished and genuinely well-made Armored Core to date. Not to say that others were poorly made, but with the success of doing other things for 10 years, they would come back to their roots with newly found inspiration. FromSoftware has said before that they don't want to be just known only as the people who make Souls, but for a company that makes interesting games. No other studio has been able to achieve such success. 2023 has been a stacked year for games, no doubt, as many times as it has been said. I believe Armored Core 6 is one of the many games. I find it to be kind of funny though, how this game has the most satisfying combat out of the several that I have played, and for it to be nominated just for one award. Not that the Game Awards is the only award show, and it's not really something all that important to me. It doesn't really matter if it gets nominated for every award or none. I just want to say, it's downright disrespectful that it has the same amount of nominees as Starfield. When the CGI trailer was shown, you got to see shots of the world and the surge of coral from the fires of Ibis, and the foreboding text describing what you must do. The world building just from that trailer alone was pretty significant in retrospect, showing the motives of your handler, Walter, right from the get-go. I guess this isn't exactly the first time From has done such a thing. Armored Core will bring upon the resurgence of mecha games. After seeing record sales for the series, I can say with great confidence there will not just be more Armored Core games in the future, but mecha games as a whole. Only a few games have made me play through several times, but Armored Core, you have a good reason for running through the game again. There's decisions you can make on missions that you already ran through previously. You are given the option to betray the corp you were working with in exchange for a higher pay or alternate routes. You also get brand new missions that you have not done previously. You get a lot of unique interactions from replaying. There is quite a lot to the dialogue of the ACs you fight. I don't only mean sheer quantity, but rather what you get from what they are saying. Many of the people who played through the game probably ran a boom boom you're dead in 2 hits build, and didn't think twice. Going back and listening to what they say to you, such as the ideological leader of the Rubicon Liberation Front, Father Domanion, on how he had voices in his head, much like 621. Although, he probably wasn't an augmented human, and he would take large amounts of coral to hear these voices. He was tempted to become one with the coral through coral convergence, but was terrified of what would happen if he crossed the point of no return. This is the third ending, called Aliacta Est, which means the die is cast. This is referring to when Julius Caesar crossed the river of Rubicon to start the war with the Senate. There is also the AC who worked with Allmind previously, V3 O'Keefe, but changed his mind, to live for how things are. To be human is to feel both pleasure and pain. Eating the sludge and slurping the bland coffee is what makes us. His comments on how this conflicts with the nature of coral, the infinite possibilities of coral, and the unknown of what happens when coral and man become one, through symbiosis. But how will this play out when they are polar opposites? How can they become one when they are so incompatible, with no hopes of controlling the coral that represents infinite possibilities? This is why the fires of Ibis happened. The rapid mutations and unpredictable nature of coral scared them, so they panicked. The yearning for knowledge drives humanity insane. Just from this, it makes sense on why the planet is called Rubicon. Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon, is profoundly interesting, as well as genuinely thought-provoking. FromSoftware is very talented at making games with deep lore, full of interesting characters, and amazing gameplay, complex narratives. You may not always understand just what is happening in the game, but it's fun to try and piece it all together. Going through the game, getting the good ending, and then the bad ending, and then seeing the third true ending. This is something they've done previously before too. I'm hoping this game gets an expansion sequel like the previous Armored Cores that give me more of the world of Rubicon. All of the questions about the coral and what happens when man and coral become one, which you get to see through the last ending, but it doesn't show you that much. As my first Armored Core game, I am now a fan of this series and will try and beat more of these games. I wanted to make a video about Armored Core as a whole for a while now. After finally finishing this video, this will probably be the last one of the year. Thank you for the support on the last video. The next one will not be longer than this, as it takes way too long. Thank you for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed. Consider subbing for when I post the next one. Until then, have a nice rest of your day.